So my FPV journey began all the way back in 2011 when one of our good friends, JB at YouTube, met someone at a slope soaring meet who was flying a mystical tricopter made out of wood and all sorts of bits cobbled together, and it had an FPV system on it. He was flying around trees and stuff and completely blew away our friend's mind. He was telling us all this, we thought he was absolutely crazy until he started getting into it himself, and then shortly after, towards the end of 2011, we started to get on the FPV train too. From the very early days, back in the fixed wing times, Dad basically worked exclusively on my aircraft. I'd sort of sit there and watch him, he'd teach me things and I might work on little bits here and there, but it was definitely sort of me watching and learning. In the quad era though, at that point I sort of had a bit more of a mechanical mindset. I was able to actually work on things, had a bit more dexterity. So with that, I did sort of start to work on things a little bit. And then I reckon around 2016 is really when I started to build my own quads from start to finish completely. And then that was also where I really got my love for design. I was already designing things before that, but that was when I was sort of confident enough to work on something that actually has a bit of a cost to it, that has a bit of a, I guess, an expense in actually doing the research and learning and testing, sort of going from just little 3D printed things or Legos and all that, to actually designing something from the ground up. One common question about FPV is, do you get dizzy when you fly? For me personally, I haven't had this experience. Sometimes when I watch other people, I'll get a bit dizzy, and I think that comes down to the fact that because you're not really predicting what they're going to do, what the inputs are going to be, how the field of view is going to warp, I think that does tend to have an influence where when you're actually in control of the vehicle, you sort of know what's coming up, and so you don't really get that sickness feeling. That being said though, because I have been flying FPV for so long, from all the way back in 2011 through to now, it's possible that I've just sort of built a tolerance over time as things have gotten faster and closer and more precise. As far as training goes, I do obviously fatigue mentally when you're training day in, day out quite a lot, especially when you're on the on-season. Right now in COVID times, it's pretty chill at the moment, but yeah, when it's on, it does get pretty intense, especially traveling from event to event. Having said that, as far as getting tired of FPV itself, I can't imagine ever getting tired of this. It's one of those things, you sort of open one door and you see 4 more, and you can sort of just keep pushing for more and more and more, and the more you get better, the more you can see of what's possible. So for me, it just seems to be a sort of never-ending journey in the pursuit of perfection. I think my love for FPV flying really comes from the fact that you get to explore. Originally, at least, that's why I loved fixed wing. You sort of got to be like you're in the plane, and you got to see the world from a different perspective. And then sort of the multi-road has really allowed me to do that more often, especially when I was going to school. You know, going out to a field to fly a fixed wing where you need a lot of airspace can be pretty hard. Not everyone's got the space to do that. Even on my way to school, it was kind of hard to find places to fly aircraft. But with the drones though, you can just take off vertically, and your pace can be dictated by the space around you. So if it's a really tight space, you just fly slow and explore the little things. If you've got an open space, you can just sort of stay wide open throttle and enjoy that. And then I think the racing just sort of became a focus of that, right? So the distillation of trying to be as accurate as possible, to try and really be in sync with space and time itself. So I guess for me, it's not so much FPV racing, I think, is an outlet of me trying to pursue this, but it's not necessarily the reason I fly. It's just a way for me to focus myself. No different to flying in a park. Trying to fly close proximity in time to music is another thing that I enjoy. It's not really the cause of what I do, it's the result of what I do. My current favorite race setup is this. What we've got here is the Impulse RC-JS1. It is a racing frame designed by myself. So far, I think we're coming up on 3 years on the running. Is it 2 or 3 years? 2 or 3 years on the running, and yeah, really happy with it. It's been performing absolutely brilliantly. Obviously a bit of a shame we can't race at the moment, since it is kind of in its peak form at the moment that we've ever had it, but it is what it is. We'll keep developing it, keep evolving, and keep moving. As far as we can see on the outside, we have a TBS Triumph Pro antenna, HQ R42 props, BMS Raptor V2 motors. On the inside, we have the Foxeer Predator V5 camera with 1.7mm lens. We're also running a Foxeer 20x20 stack, which is the Foxeer Reaper 45 amp and the F722 Pro flight controller. Then for RX and VTX, we have the TBS Tracer for controlling and the TBS Unify Pro 32 Nano for video transmission. So that's the setup I've been running at the moment. I'm really happy with it, and I really hope I get to race it soon. Itching for a race, that's for sure. So finally we have the batteries I use to power this machine. What my favorite is at the moment is the Tattu 1300 mAh V4 battery. The 1300s and the 1400s actually tend to perform really similar. So what we find is on the track, when you run them both back to back, is that they actually perform about the same. However, I find when I'm nervous, I tend to prefer the lighter weight feel of the 1300 and tend to fly that a little more accurately. So in this case, it really came down to sort of my confidence in flying in a race environment. However, the data does show that they tend to perform about the same on this setup. Another common question we get is battery care. How do we maintain our batteries and keep them running? For example, I have old Tattu batteries from 3 or 4 years ago that are still going strong today. Obviously not to the same spec as a new battery like this, but for things like practice, cinematics, flying with friends, they really still do work quite well for that. I think the most important thing about battery care is just not running them too low. Obviously overcharging is bad for them too, but running them low tends to yield more damage. We have a lot of experience with our batteries where maybe in a practice event in an international race, I've decided to go for those extra laps just to get more data in, get more practice. All of those batteries that were ran lower have all died early. Either it's 6 months in the future, some of them even just almost straight away, some of them even a year or two in the future, where the other batteries will still be working in that group, yeah? So let's say I got 10 batteries in a batch, I ran one of them low, that one will always die noticeably earlier than the rest. With that too, overcharging does do harm to the batteries. We don't tend to overcharge, our setup is quite efficient compared to other quads, so we don't usually have to worry about that. But yeah, overcharging the battery will do damage. Running the battery too low does a lot of damage. One trick that I tend to use for myself is to land at 3.8 volts for any practices, any kind of training and all that, since there is no real rush, there's no need to damage the battery unnecessarily in an environment like that. So by landing at 3.8 volts, it's already at storage. Even if I leave the batteries parked up for 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, that doesn't really matter, right? Obviously for me, this being my job, I do tend to cycle the batteries quite regularly, but it's more having that luxury to do that. You're not putting any unnecessary cycles into the battery, you're not taking anything unnecessary out of it. It's just sort of the right balance where you yield the most life out of your batteries. My story for Tattu starts with meeting a man by the name of Matt. So he works at Tattu, and he is incredibly driven from a sense of passion, basically, right? It's not just a job for him. We basically spent ages just talking about how cool FPV is and some of his aspirations for what he thinks is possible, where he thinks this can go. And then beyond that too, he's just a really nice person. And so it's one of those times where I guess, you even though it is business, it is also friendships. It's forming, new friendships with people. We would spend time just talking about cars and things just totally unrelated to FPV. And that was sort of one of those areas where it's sort of, you see this big company, but then you sort of meet someone in the company. You start to meet the people and make friends with them. And, I guess you sort of form a friendship that's going to last forever, basically. One more sneaky story that's sort of unrelated from the sponsorship side of things. Shenzhen 2019, I am running 1300 mAh batteries on a mammoth of a track. We'd obviously done a lot of testing beforehand to know that our setup's capable of running full pace with those batteries, and we were finding that we actually were having extra power left in the tank, which was pretty fun. And that event, we had so many people come up to us and ask us how we're actually doing it. How is it that our setup's performing at that standard, and we're not killing batteries, we're not overcharging, we're not running the batteries excessively low. How are we doing it? And that felt really, really cool. Having both the new batteries that were performing really well, and then also the fact that our setup was so dialed in to be able to run those lighter weight batteries and just stay at full pace. One more cool story. So, we're in Ningbo in 2019 for the Pan Asian Grand Prix hosted by MultiGP. My start was pretty awful, right? Basically, I had a broadcasting camera take me out, I had a gate fall on me, I had someone hit a gate and the LED swung down as I was going through and take my quad out. Because the ground was all concrete or water, pretty much every crash was a destroyed quad, right? Especially at those speeds, it was a really high speed track. Had another quad at the start when we hit arm. They had a prop on backwards, the quad flipped over and slammed into mine and somehow managed to have enough force to actually break carbon and do damage. Don't even understand that I've hit gates at 200 k's an hour, a quad flips over at the start and smashes my quad. Who knows how that happens, but it did. My 6S fleet was completely destroyed and I only had 3 4-cell quads left, and I only had a few 4S batteries because I honestly didn't think I'd need them. But anyway, we got a few more from Tattu. These were the 1550 4-cell V3s. This was before the V4s were released, sort of mid 2019. And anyway, I make it all the way into the finals somehow. After all of that, I guess at that point I was probably just not nervous at all anymore, because it was just like, everything's gone wrong, I'm not winning this event, it doesn't matter, I'm just gonna chill, right? But anyway, chipping our way through, we've made our way into the finals, and I'm up against Min-chan, Moto FPV, and Bulldozer FPV, and these guys are all ballistically fast, like just otherworldly fast, and I'm somehow gonna pull some magic here, right? The race, I think, was a 6-lap race. It was pretty intense. It was a really high-speed track because everyone was on 6L, and because my early practices were on 6L, they're based off of that this is the amount of laps we should do, even though now I was running really small 4-cell batteries, and it was like, damn, I hope this works, right? But anyway, the batteries performed brilliantly, the quad performed brilliantly, and we did manage to snag a 2nd place. The final had to be ran 5 times. It was a super competitive race. It was always neck and neck between us, and it is one of the most coolest races I've ever done. So where do I see the future of FPV? I honestly think it's going to keep getting bigger and better. You just look at the technology that people are developing, from the battery manufacturing to motors that are running cooler and faster, and props with better aero and lighter frames and better flight controllers. I help with some of the beta flight development, and the stuff they're doing at the moment is absolutely off the planet. The next update of 4.3 is going to be absolutely ridiculous, by the way. It's all happening on the tech side. You look at some of the DVRs that people are pulling off at the moment, and it's ridiculous. I do think it's going to be a bit of a free-for-all once all border restrictions open up, since there are going to be new names that we haven't heard of that are going to be absolutely amazing. You're going to have some of the old names returning. Obviously in places like Korea, they haven't been racing as much lately, but everyone's still been able to practice. In Australia, we've had lockdowns and things that have gotten in the way a bit, but then also we've got the space, so that when things do open up again, we're going to be for sure practicing and on the grind again. I think it's going to be really hectic. I think it's going to be really good. A few of the international crowd probably know I wanted to host my own international event a couple years ago. Obviously, COVID happened. That stopped that from happening. I'm still bent on doing that and holding the biggest, best race event ever. So, yeah, honestly, I just think the community's grown. Everyone's fueled in the racing industry. The cinematic industry's really taken off and gone bigger and better. I just think it's going to keep getting better, faster, stronger, everything. Yeah, super excited for the future. Join us. Finally, some advice to FPV race pilots. Now, this advice I've got here is something I've stuck to pretty much forever, since it actually came from the pilot that really inspired me to push myself in racing, Stunt Double FPV. His thing was always have fun, and stick time is everything, right? So for me, obviously, if you're just doing stick time and you burn yourself out, that's, you're not really enjoying it at that point, you're going to stop. So it's trying to find that balance between, you obviously push yourself, but then also keep it fun, keep it enjoyable. For me, obviously, that's just pretty, I guess it's almost built into me. I would want to say it's kind of easy for me, in the sense that I love the hobby, I love what it is, I love flying at the highest level with all the other crazy pilots that are around in the world, and I also love the cinematics, I love freestyle, I love precision flying, slow or fast. So I think it's just that, keeping it fun, keeping it fresh, that just, it drives you to do more, it makes it easier to fly more, and so therefore you do fly more, you gain more experience, you enjoy that experience, you put more time into flying, and you go as a pilot, you go as a person, and then enjoy the whole fun community and lifestyle that is FPV. And there we go, that's all the questions answered for this interview for Tattu. Thank you so much to everyone, I guess, all the people watching this, all my sponsors, Tattu for making this all possible, and just being an awesome company to work with that makes some of the coolest batteries in the world. Yeah, I love the journey that is FPV, I love you guys, and hopefully see you at the field sometime. See ya!
2018 FA World Championship in Longgang, Shenzhen, China. He and his father Paul look very friendly and very easy to touch, always with their smile on their faces. So we start our first conversation. Yes, Thomas is a really young pilot, and he has won a lot of prizes before. I know he has been using Tattu batteries, so I'm very excited and a lot of respect for him. So I do care for him. I said I'm Matt from Tattu. Nice to meet you. Thomas is 19 years old at that time. He was the same age as our Chinese pilot, my little brother Hailang. Many perspectives are similar. I saw the same passion and focus on FPV in Thomas, the same as Hailang. Something about Thomas' feeling about our land and his experience and suggestions for improvement, including later. He also provided a lot of valuable suggestions about our latest series before, which is very helpful to improve our product. Of course, I have lived in New Zealand, so we had talked a lot of New Zealand, Australia. When I talk about the car brand called Holden, which car is very famous using in New Zealand as a police car. So we discovered our common hobbies. So it directly opened our conversation with more and more common interested topics. So we become friends. We all know that COVID-19 is serious now. So I hope Thomas, Paul, and his family can stay healthy. Thomas haven't graduated, so I hope the graduation paper cannot trouble him a lot. If he couldn't think of a topic of the disease, I think he could think about how to protect lipos. After all, he is an expert of it. I really hope we can meet each other soon. Matt is here waiting for you, Thomas and your family.